7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to Rise to Liberty, and I've got probably the most important person that you've probably never heard of, and that's Ryan Dawson of ANC Report. Thanks so much, Ryan, for being on the show today.
I like the heavy metal, and I like Rise to Liberty. My old boinker was Rise to Sense.
Oh, nice.
My name being Rye, and I spelled it that way.
So
it was from Thomas Paine's Common Sense, and it was also like sense as in sensei.
Yeah.
I'm living in Japan. Yep.
So real quick, for anyone who doesn't know, you're probably the most banned person who's not on the internet. Nicholas Fuentes, eat your heart out. Like that dude.
Nick, come on. I was being banned on AOL and MySpace when he was in middle school, possibly elementary school. We've been kicked off all the same things. I just got kicked off them first and multiple times.
Yeah, exactly.
So, he is censored, though, and I disagree with that. Even though, like, it doesn't matter what I think about what he says. He shouldn't be censored. He's not saying anything illegal.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be censored.
Yeah, completely agree. Same with you, though.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I have yet to see anything that you have said that is illegal, controversial, sure. But illegal or anything that
not saying anything hateful either. That's what I get accused of. I'm like,
yeah.
What? I don't want you shooting Palestinian kids in the nuts. I guess that's anti-Semitic. Oh, I'm not supporting ISIS. I guess that's Islamophobic. You know, that's the kind of canard we have today.
Yeah, that's just ridiculous. So
only women should play women's sports. You hate trans people. There's no nuance anymore.
Yeah. You deny their existence.
I do, actually. I mean, they exist, but like they're playing pretend, and I'm not going to go along with it.
Yeah, but that's hate speech.
Yeah.
So, that's just insane.
I mean, I think you hate women. You're invading their space.
Yeah.
You have all these biological advantages, and it doesn't matter if you reduce your hormones. That's only one of the advantages. If you're a swimmer, for example, you have a larger lung capacity, you're taller, denser bones, all that. Like, it's not just the muscles and things. It's not just testosterone. You're so different and should not be playing sports against one another on a professional level. It's common sense. That's why it's segregated.
Well, and who thought that saying something like, you should not inject children with hormones would be such a controversial statement?
Yeah. Don't give little kids puberty blockers. Kids don't have agency.
Yeah.
Leave them alone. I don't care. Like they confuse masculine and feminine with male and female. It doesn't matter if a boy wants to wear pink dresses or whatever. He's still a boy, and he's a boy that likes dresses. So what? Yeah. It doesn't make him a girl. You're actually reinforcing the stereotypes of gender roles of being saying, oh, well, girls are supposed to wear dresses. So if a boy wants to wear a dress, he's supposed to be a girl. No, he's just a kid, and he likes to wear a dress. So what? Is he like a boys are boys, girls are girls? That's permanent. Feminine and masculine are the social constructs. Those are the ones that are like arbitrary as far as what all colors mean and stuff like that. That's societal, and it differs from one place to another. Pink used to be the boy's color, in fact, and baby blue was the girl's color. There's nothing in nature that like set up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So one thing we were talking about before the stream started was what a piece of shit Lincoln is.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So
that's almost an insult to shit.
So do you want to give a quick rundown of why Lincoln is such a piece of shit?
Yeah, stinking Lincoln is often praised like Jesus Gandhi or something, and he's the great abolitionist and freed the slaves. And so if you go after him and someone's of that ilk, it's like, what are you, pro-slavery? Blah, blah, blah. Well, absolutely not. I mean, slavery is horrible, and we shouldn't have instituted it in 2011 when Obama invaded Libya. And we shouldn't have offshore sweatshops today. right? And all the exploitation that occurs in labor today. Apple, making phones in China with women jumping off buildings that have suicide nets. That is sick and disgusting. That's not what Lincoln did. That is your school book fairy tale version of what the man was and what he believed. He's a staunch racist, which is not uncommon in the 1850s and 60s. That's pretty much what almost all of them believed, including blacks, Indians, and Chinese themselves. There was a superior and an inferior, and Lincoln was a man of his times. He was not above the times, and he wanted racial segregation. And he was opposed to slavery, but not because of how immoral slavery is of, owning a person like property and the way they're treated. It was simply because he didn't think blacks and whites could live together at all. And he didn't want to expand slavery out west because he didn't want races to mix. But the South had already conceded to not expand slavery out west. It didn't matter. And he actually, the Congress before the Civil War, Congress, I forget the names, but it was out of Ohio and one out of New York. But one was Corwin, the Corwin Amendment. It's a constitutional amendment that enshrined slavery into the U.S. Constitution. The federal government could not interfere with states' laws about labor. And the South rejected it and seceded anyway, because that was never the reason for the Civil War. But they act like it's a better reason. Like, it sounds better to fight a war to free the slaves. So that's what, from around the 1960s to now, has been the rationalization for a war that murdered 1 million people and displaced. If you were to take it by percentages, and given all the starvation and death from the war and Reconstruction, just within the first year after the war ended, from like 1865 to 66, it would be like America getting in a war and losing 17 million people. That's how devastating the Civil War was. Even, like, forget per capita, just on raw numbers, more men died in the Civil War than all of America's other wars combined.
But we are the racist country.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's pretty hard to fight a war over slavery when 7 of your own states have slaves, and that's black slaves, and all of them had coolies, Chinese slaves, and Native American slaves, or just even worse, just genocided them like General Custer did, who was a Union general. He was in the cavalry at Gettysburg, right? And then he's fighting at Little Bighorn and Greasy Grass and Wounded Knee. That's all. It's the same people, same Union soldiers, same Union generals murdering Indians. They weren't like anti-racist or anything like that. And the last states in the Union to end slavery were all northern states. The entire South was done, right? Your June 16th or whatever, your Juneteenth, June 19th. California still had slaves. New Jersey still had slaves. Kentucky, Delaware, all these northern states had slaves. And California did end it on paper, but not in reality. They continued to enslave blacks, natives, and Chinese for decades after the Civil War. And so did the Nevada territories, and so did what ends up becoming Utah for a long time. Okay. And General Grant had slaves throughout the duration of the war. So did Washington, D.C., West Virginia, Maryland, Missouri, all these border states, plus Jersey and Cali. So you can't really be fighting to end slavery when, half your side still has slaves. And they weren't. And there were people who believed that, people who didn't. But the South was fighting because they got invaded. People didn't join the Army of Northern Virginia, people who didn't own slaves and never would, did not go and fight and die so some rich person on a plantation in Mississippi could have his slaves. They went there because Yankees invaded Virginia and were shooting, burning, raping, looting. So they went to stop them to protect their own homestead. It's when you explain this to liberals, you have to give them an example of when a Republican did something wrong. So let's say like the second invasion of Iraq, purely based on lies. No, it wasn't for oil. It was all about Israel, but whatever. Why do you think the Iraqis resisted U.S. occupation? Was it because they all loved Saddam and everything he stood for and did? Or because we were over there killing them and blowing up their homes, bridges, and infrastructure. And they had suffered through all the Clinton sanctions, watching their children starve to death. Okay, maybe that's why they hated us.
So maybe
the Confederacy
right.
fought you because you went into their land and set it on fire and started shooting people. Maybe. But that doesn't, like, nah, man, you're fighting because of this and this political reason. Like, no, you're fighting because you have an invading army and navy on their land and in their territory waters.
Which makes complete sense, and it makes sense that Lincoln actually was not doing any of the things that modern history books say.
No, he started the war too. The war didn't start at Fort Sumter. The war started when he sent revenue cutters like SS Harriet Lane down and shot at the Nashville and tried to blockade Charleston Harbor and collect his new export tax, and shooting people, peaceful protesters in Maryland, and arresting people and arresting judges, and thousands of people thrown in jail, 300 newspapers shut down. I mean, he was the old school woke neocon, right? Just shut down the paper. You have to understand there is no TV or radio or internet. So if you close down the newspapers, that is the media. And that was the marriage of the press and the state starts with Lincoln. He shut down any paper that was critical of him. And so it's just state-run media. It's kind of like New York Times and Washington Post today. They're war propagandists. They go along with whoever's in charge, right? The Post might as well have just been CIA for decades. Every single war, think about it, in your lifetime, in your parents' lifetime, in your grandparents' lifetime, every war started with a lie, right? Oh, Assad gassed his own people. No, he didn't. Oh, there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. No, there isn't. All babies on incubators. Nope. Gulf of Tonkin? No. Like, go through the list. It's a lie. And every single lie, every single one was supported by mass media because there's no dissent. And that includes social media nowadays. Look at the Ukraine conflict, right? Everything on Twitter and Facebook is pro-Ukraine, because if it's not, you get kicked off the platform. And every talking head promotes the lie. That all started with stinking Lincoln. We used to have hundreds of different papers. Now I've got like 6 main ones, and they all fall in line. Lincoln did that. Lincoln married the corporation estate, the railroad companies, the steel foundries. They're all getting giant subsidies from the federal government.
Yeah. And I mean, it's easier to control when you only have 6 main papers.
Yeah. And look, nowadays it's there's 4 major industries that profiteer through government. You've got the MIC, right? The military industrial complex. That's how you get monstrosities like the $1.5 trillion F-35 and stuff like that. You've got big pharma, right? Which even before COVID-19, it was something, right? It's the Oxycontin, the Ritalin, the whatever. They're always pushing out antidepressants or something on children, on whatever. Then you've got big energy, and you got ESGs, all this green energy. That kind of dovetails with the rest of it. But energy now, the big new thing is the wind turbines and solar panels and stuff. They're destroying the economy by trying to transition away from fossil fuels. And it doesn't work. I mean, the output of solar panels and stuff just aren't there yet. And so they don't care. It's a government subsidized industry. They invest in it. And the price of these things is going up, not because of the earnings or from the output of sales or production. It's just based on new investment. And people are investing because the government's investing. So it's a sure shit deal. It's creating a bubble. And, you know, the national interest be damned. But that whole philosophy of the government picking winners and losers in the marketplace is a complete antithesis of the Jeffersonian, like John Locke model of how things ought to be. Thomas Paine, James Madison, Monroe. You could call it the Jefferson faction. Lincoln was a Hamiltonian. Alexander Hamilton, Henry Clay, Lincoln, they believed in strong federal government, and they They don't want free markets. It's free markets on the bottom, but at the top, it's all the state. And so then he instituted the income tax. It was not Jekyll Island. It was not, that's the Fed in 1913. That's bullshit. It was Lincoln. He started it. And his greenbacks, this one triggers me. Like, didn't he go against the Fed because of his greenbacks? There was no Fed to go against, first of all. He did have greenbacks. They were worth about 35 cents at the end of the war. You know how he paid for the war? War bonds, which the South had to pay, and they had to pay in gold. He had driven the nation into hyperinflation. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Grant, part of that too. Of course, General Grant becomes president because all the southern states other than Tennessee had a military occupation and veterans weren't allowed to vote. And blacks voted as a block, however the Union told them to. That's why they were given the right to vote. Interestingly, they weren't giving the right to vote in the North, just the South. There was black suffrage, but only in the South, where Republicans could use them as a voting bloc. Just like illegal aliens today, they don't give a damn about their quality of life or anything. They just want them to vote Democrat. States like Wisconsin, or actually the whole Northwest, just made rules saying, no, blacks can't vote. And then the only few northern states that allowed it were the ones who had no significant black population, and it didn't matter. Like Maine is 0.5%. Who cares? But places like New York, they said, yeah, you can vote if you own property, which none of them did, right? So it took a long time to get black suffrage in the North, but it was instantaneous in the South, and they also took voting rights away from whites. So it's like, well, how is that equality? You granted one group, and only the men, not women, one group rights, but you took them away from another. So it shows you it wasn't about like helping blacks. It was punishing the South. Like if you're going to give, it's not about equality either. If you're going to give rights to blacks and take it away from whites, it's just political. You want them to vote a certain way. You're afraid the other group won't vote that way. So you take their right to vote away and you give it to the other one. And then you tell them, yeah, we gave you that, so you should vote for us. It was about political power. And all the new senators out west, they had like 12 new states, and every single one of them got 2 Republican senators.
So what would the exact reason be that Lincoln and the North would want to hurt the South so badly?
Transfer wealth to the North. It was his bankers. Lincoln in the beginning was hesitant. It was it's the little snakes in his ear from Boston and Philadelphia, and to a smaller degree, New York City. New York City also threatened to secede and join the Confederacy. That was 1861, January 6th. Isn't that something? But no, the bankers got in his ear because they weren't going to allow Charleston to have a free trade area. I mean, if they have it, we need to have it. Why? What's going to happen? You know, half the country, there's no tariff or a very small one, and whereas yours is 45%, right? The writing was on the wall. You have to force them into the union. You have to collect the tax. And what was happening too is they're collecting taxes from the entire nation, but they're spending all the tax revenue in the North. So again, it was taxation without representation. You're going to tax the hell out of the South and Southern products. Cotton, the South was producing 80% of the cotton in the world. Okay. Tobacco and other things, it was cash crops more than agriculture, but things made and sold in the South to Europeans. And the entirety of it almost was spent on Northern public works and Northern industry. And the government should not be in the business of selecting who all gets to do well. Like, we're just going to give money to such and such railroad that, you know, half of Congress is tied to in one way or another, right? It's profiteering. And they're in competition with building railroads out west. They wanted to connect with California desperately, and Chicago and New Orleans were in competition. Well, New Orleans has slaves, and the North has, they also basically had to script pay slaves too, and they had the federal government giving them money, right? So they're going to end up with it. But you get these giant robber barons. You can hear the kids screaming. It's distracting the hell out of me. I'm sorry. I can't think.
It's cool. I completely
It's
understand.
about his nap time. So, but anyway, yeah, it was government subsidies, and like why they wanted to punish the South too. I mean, they lost a lot of people. The North,
Yeah.
the North wins the war, but they lose 150,000 more guys. I mean, they in every battle they were losing, almost every single battle they lost more men than the South did. Um, Gettysburg, it was like the only time where it was like, I don't know, like 23,000 to 25,000 or something, where the South lost more men. But sometimes they like Cold Harbor, the North lost 12 times as many people, right? Fredericksburg, they lost 7 times as many people. The first Fredericksburg, they were getting destroyed on the battlefield, and they shouldn't have, because they have way more artillery and the better kind. They have naval ships. South
Yeah.
had to turn merchant ships into warships. They have way more soldiers, 100,000 man army in some cases. They better equipment, better guns, better horses, better everything, and still lose because their command was by and large chosen through nepotism. And they also had a lot of mercenaries from like Ireland and Germany. And, a couple guys drop beside you and you're like, what am I doing here? And turn around and run. And the South had some pretty fantastic generals in Stonewall, Forrest, and Lee, and Hoke later in the war. And the North is mediocre to terrible. And the South had a few bad ones like Bragg, but they just had better command structure, more experience. They've some of them fought in the Mexican War, fought Indian wars. The North benefited from all that, but didn't have skin in the game, right? But when they started fighting each other, Southerners were, to everyone's surprise, destroying these giant Northern armies. That war could have been over in a year if they'd done what Wilfred Scott said, just set up a blockade and wait. Because there was no, without the ability for trade, the South was not self-sufficient. It didn't have a manufacturing base, barely. I mean, almost the entirety of their cannons were out of Birmingham. Like they just didn't have, a couple bullet factories in Richmond. Like they didn't have those things. So they weren't planning on going to war. They seceded. They didn't secede and then attack the North. They seceded and then the North attacked them. They weren't trying to take over and force their way on the North. It's the opposite. They left because of the Lincolnite taxes on them, among other cultural differences. And a lot of the Southern states were already phasing out slavery. Right, with Southern presidents that ended the transatlantic slave trade. Jefferson did that. He also ended the expansion into the Ohio Valley region and tried to end slavery in the state of Virginia, lost by just a couple votes. Virginia did end slavery during the Civil War, so did Tennessee. And Virginia was the largest Southern state. Didn't matter. It's never what the war was about. Everybody knew that.
So history is just not what we're told.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that's part of the basis of my entire show is breaking your government instilled programming. So,
I'll add something else too. It wasn't even North versus South, clearly. They talked about the Mason-Dixon line and all that. The state of Maryland did not secede, had troops on both sides. North Carolina and Tennessee had troops on both sides. The third largest regiments in the Northern Army by the end of the war were from North Carolina. Right? They had more troops from North Carolina than most northern states other than Pennsylvania and I think Massachusetts. So, it was like if the other half of North Carolina, if Western Carolina and East Tennessee had fought for the South, you might have had a different war. Then obviously the western part of Virginia, which had slaves, becomes West Virginia, right? It doesn't secede. They stayed in the Union. The rest of Virginia didn't. But the entirety of the state had slaves. And Virginia ended it before West Virginia did. See, Aaron, only by a week, but still, it's because the Western territories, Western Virginia, East Tennessee, West North Carolina, were not that affected by the tariffs because they're not on the water and they're not doing sea trade. So they didn't care and they wanted to stay in the Union. But everybody along the Mississippi and everybody along the coastline wanted out because they were getting raped, right? But you can see, like, well, why do these territories, why are they still fighting on the Union side? Because they were not being squeezed and they wanted to stay in the United States. They were not feeling the tariff pressure the way the East was.
Interesting.
But believe me, they definitely had slavery. That didn't matter.
So I do kind of want to switch gears here just a little bit and talk about 9/11, because that's one of the things that you're known for. That's actually how I had found your content, was researching 9/11 myself. Also, I was told I shouldn't listen to you, so you were the first person I listened to. And so I guess my first question would be, what is the biggest misunderstanding about 9/11 that most people either get wrong or something wrong that they believe?
I would say not even wrong, like don't know at all. And that would be the anthrax attack. There was a follow-up biological attack that's with notes full of weapons grade anthrax that said 9/11 on the top of the notes, death to America, death to Israel. And they were sent to U.S. senators and people in the media to try to kill them, Patrick Leahy and Tom Daschle. Patrick Leahy had the Leahy Amendment, which would forbid military aid to Israel. So they tried to kill him. And in the beginning, everybody thought Al-Qaeda had sent the anthrax because it said 9/11 on the top of the notes. We just had a terrorist attack from Al-Qaeda, somebody sending weapons-grade anthrax to these people, U.S. senators and such. And it had also been mailed from the locations of where the hijacker cells were, right? So it's concentrated in Florida and New Jersey. That's where the letters come from. They thought, oh, okay, sleeper cells, whatever. They sent anthrax after the other guys ran the planes in the buildings. Very quickly, though, from analyzing the anthrax spores, they realized, nah, nobody from the cave did this. This had additives to it. It had catalyst placed on it. This came from a very advanced lab. There's only 3 countries in the world with the capacity to make this: the United States, Russia, and Israel. So somebody either infiltrated a lab and stole it, or they're still working there. And so they chased around this guy named Stephen Hatfield for a while, and then this guy, Bruce Ivins, who was suicided before he had a trial. But what people forget is this attack was used as a justification to invade Iraq. Colin Powell went to the UN with a mock vial of anthrax, right? He holds up a little vial with white stuff in it. It wasn't anthrax, but it's to look like it. And made this whole presentation straight from George Tenet and Louis Leibowitz, by the way, about mobile weapons labs that had the ability to make anthrax. And this dovetailed off another lie that came from James Woolsey, and then later the New York Observer, which owned by Kushner, where based on Israeli intelligence, they claimed there was a meeting in Prague. Czech and Israeli intelligence, they said, a meeting in Prague where Mohammed Atta, the guy that ran Flight 11 into the North Tower, met with senior Iraqi officials, and they passed them anthrax. And this was written about on the Weekly Standard. It's an outfit for PNAC, Project for New American Century. And they are claiming there's this meeting in Prague and between Iraqis and 9/11 hijackers. After the first anthrax letter was opened, they waited. Then they're like, oh yeah, and the Iraqis gave Al-Qaeda anthrax too. And we know because the Israelis witnessed it. Well, the Israelis did not witness that because that never happened. There was no meeting in Prague. Iraq didn't have anthrax, neither did Al-Qaeda. So the Israelis made it up. But that was used as the pretext to invade Iraq anyway. Hey, they're violation of UN Resolution 1441, stipulating they can't have WMDs. Anthrax is a WMD. They passed it to Al-Qaeda, who attacked us with it. The whole thing was a lie. And they knew it was a lie. That's why they stopped saying it was Al Qaeda. The official story blames it on Bruce Ivins, the guy that worked at Fort Detrick, Maryland. Interestingly, is they ignore the fact that a man named Philip Zachariah, had been caught on camera stealing anthrax from Fort Detrick, Maryland in the past, right before the World Trade Center attack in 1993. He'd been fired from his job. He made a gang called the Camel Club, and they were picking on this Egyptian co-worker, harassing the hell out of this guy. His name was Assad, too. During the anthrax investigation, somebody sends an anonymous letter to the FBI blaming Assad for the anthrax. And he knew it's who it was. Oh, that's that guy that got fired for harassing me and is on tape stealing anthrax. He was illegally doing gain-of-function research on anthrax in the lab. He had a cohort, Dr. Ripley, that Miriam, she let him in at night after hours after he'd been fired. And there's 23 samples of anthrax missing. Okay. Most likely that someone involved with that stole it again, and that's who mailed it and blamed it on whoever they could blame it on. Hatfield, Assad, Ivan, there, Al Qaeda, anybody but the ones that like who would write "Death to America, Death to Israel" on the notes and then also say they witnessed Iraq giving the anthrax to Al Qaeda. Who? Iran? No. Cuba? No. North Korea? No. Somebody. I can't. It's right on my nose. Who did that? The same people. I mean, you look at PNAC is full of a bunch of Zionist Jewish supremacists that are lying about everything. They lied about, and William Safire, Guardian of Zion Award, writes about there's chemical weapons in the palaces of Saddam, right? Nope, you lied. New York Times, full of shit. And then, of course, Judith Miller, she blamed everything on Iraq. She blamed Oklahoma City on Iraq. She blamed 93 World Trade Center on Iraq. And obviously, she's going to blame 9/11 on Iraq. She's dating Louis Libby, who's a lawyer for Mark Rich, who's a Mossad agent, Cheney's chief of staff. Got, Mark Rich was pardoned by Clinton his last hour in office. James Woolsey, the guy that lied about the anthrax, was the head of the CIA, chosen by Clinton, blackmailed by Epstein. There's almost like some group has infiltrated the United States and is just filling us with bullshit about our media and lying about Iraq and mailing anthrax to senators who are critical of Israel. Gee, I wonder who it is. Then you see the Israelis celebrating the attacks of 9/11 at Doric Towers, doing a little jig, high-fiving and hugging each other. All of them lie about the timelines. You got another group of Israelis straight out of Jerusalem that were arrested for doing illegal work on the fire prevention systems in the World Trade Centers. That's another one that's missing. So I'll tell you what happens when people talk about 9/11. They talk about Building 7 and physics. That's all they talk about. And the role 9/11 was a jointly conducted covert intelligence operation similar to Iran-Contra. You got multiple players: Saudi Arabia, Israel, the United States. Like most operations go. I mean, the Contra affair deeply involved the Israelis and the U.S. Deeply. The Israelis have been diverting guns out of Nicaragua for generations. The Somoza family have been diverting guns on their behalf since the 40s. And so, yeah, they're involved. The U.S. gets involved after the coup in Iran 79. They try to warm up the faction that still exists there, giving them airplane parts and stuff and making money off the contraband sales to pay for the Contras to kill Sandinistas in Nicaragua, because the Sandinistas are the ones who overflew the Somozas. Well, it wasn't enough, so they end up getting into the narcotic business too, and you know all that with the Barry Seal and so on. Barry Seal, trained by David Ferry, by the way, from JFK. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, CIA brings in drugs. No shock, right? And the proceeds go for off the books, black budget things, including supporting Contras, warlords, terrorist groups, you name it, across the board.
Anything they can't publicly fund.
Right, and that's what the opium in Afghanistan was for. It wasn't just to create an opioid crisis in the United States. It's the profits. So that's how we pay Al Qaeda. That's how we paid
No.
HGS on Earth Front, or al-Sham, and all the moderate rebels in Syria. That was narco money that the CIA laundered through groups like Purple Shovel and all these intermediaries and stuff. But ultimately, it's just a bunch of conduits, including the FSA itself, to get money to terrorists to try to topple the regime in Syria. And what use is to topple Assad in Syria? Is that in American interest or Israeli interest? It goes against American interest, but it's in Israel's interest, so we do it.
So,
because they have a massive blackmail and bribery circuit inside the United States, deeply rooted in there. And that's why these people can bulldoze down a house and just run over people and set them on fire and move into someone's living room and say, if I didn't do it, someone else would. And our press won't touch that with a 6 million foot pole.
and how does Epstein tie into a lot of that?
Jeffrey Epstein and Glenn Maxwell and Jean-Luc Brunel were running a blackmail ring. Epstein's problem was he dipped in his own supply. It was on behalf of the Israeli state. That's why all the seed money is coming from Les Wexner and Leon Black and Glenn Dubin. And they all have something in common. They're supremacists, and they're working for the Maxwell family itself. Her father worked for Israeli intelligence.
Explain the bell real quick. For
the merchant bell, yeah, it's just saying because if you're on YouTube, whatever, I don't want to get you banned by saying a certain word. So, yeah. But they all belong to a little tribe that wears little hats. And this needs to be pointed out. I'm going to be real fucking clear. This isn't like the Jews. That's retarded. It's those Jews, not the Jews.
Yeah.
And you should be able to point out supremacists no matter who they are. White supremacists, Jewish supremacists, black supremacists, Muslim supremacists, whatever. But you can't. Because people are so hypersensitive to go on a witch hunt to find a racist or a sexist, a homophobe, or something, that they hear the word Jewish and their fucking brain turns off. Right? But look, these people are fucking child murdering pedophiles. And they happen to be Jewish. Gee, Jewish supremacists are Jewish. I wonder why. Yeah, most Nazis are white too. Because why wouldn't they be? But millions of Jews have nothing to do with this. Don't own a bank, don't own media, aren't pedophiles. It's just this. You're talking about a couple dozen people. Okay? But they're the ones that are in charge. Because the U.S. has a interest in letting extreme groups come into power, and that it doesn't matter if it's a Jewish extremist, Muslim extremist, cartels in Mexico, whatever. They support the drug cartels, they support Wahhabi Salafists, and they support Zionists, because when any of those kind of groups are in power, it's a guaranteed recipe for conflict, and conflict means you get to sell more guns. It's all about the money.
Which is Saudi Arabia that buys them.
Saudi Arabia, oh yes, Bahrain, Israel, all these companies that's why I call them companies instead of countries. All these companies have despots for leaders because the U.S. backs the Likud party. They back the Saudi monarchs, right? And you could click it over to Asia. It's same story. Africa, same story. Do it or I'll kill you and put your cousin in power, that kind of stuff. So Boko Haram, all these groups, none of these groups would exist if the U.S. was genuinely against them. But they're not. They want them fighting each other. It keeps them down. Keep the Middle East in an arms race. It's good for U.S. hegemony. And the U.S. and Israel have this relationship. The only colonial power that didn't die after World War II were the Israelis. They're annexing land on Palestine. It's a colonial regime, just like the British, the French, the Americans. They're taking territory. They're ethnically cleansing people. They're setting up Jewish-only settlements. By like a rule, you have to be a Jew to live in them. No other kind of person can live in them. It's a racist pariah state. And these racists have a lot of compadres in the US, Canada, whatever, that are like, because of the trauma of the Holocaust and other things, feel like they can do no wrong and they have to support them or it's going to happen again or something. And in a way, they kind of do have the tiger by the tail, because Israel has preemptively attacked all their neighbors. They've attacked the United States too. And even 10% of this, if the public was aware of all the things that Israel's done, including stealing nuclear weapons from the United States, killing sailors, blowing up hotels, chopping off heads, torturing kids, all the stuff they do, that state wouldn't exist. And so they're in an existential crisis. It's like, well, they can't undo all the stuff they've already done. And so they're in a parasitic relationship where they have to maintain control over U.S. media and military power, or it's over, right? They've already crossed the line, like, into the land of unforgivableness, right? They bombed Syria. They're still doing it. They've attacked Lebanon. They've attacked Egypt, Jordan. Like, everyone hates them. Because it's a racist pariah state, but they're able to exist based on might makes right. They have force alone. That's it. And so all their eggs are in one basket. It's the United States. And the moment that relationship ends, Israel's done.
Well, and they do a lot of weapons research for us, right? Like they do some development.
They do it for themselves. With our money. Yeah.
And then we buy them, manufacture them, and then sell them to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, we give them away to Israel. We sell them to the Saudis. The Saudis buys a lot of that stuff with the dollar overhang, you could say. But these perfume princes, the reason they have the relationship they have with the United States is cheap oil. And even in the U.S., like when we talk about like electrical production, only 1% of U.S. electrical power is from oil. The other 99% 51 is from coal. And the rest is from like hydro, nuclear, and so on. Only 1% is oil. Oil is just for gasoline. But keeping the oil production rate high undermined the Soviet Union, undermines the Russians, because they're dependent on selling oil. So if you make it cheap, it destroys them. The higher the gas price is, the stronger Russia is. As Al, you can see the stupidity of the current regime. Right? We're going to sanction Venezuela and Iran and Russia and has Saudis already at maximum capacity, and we're not going to buy it from Russians at all. But you are, because you're just going to buy it from somebody who buys it from them, so they're still making the money. So you're making them stronger than ever. But they don't get it. Like the way Reagan got to them was make the oil cheaper. Because the Russian economy at that time was very dependent on natural gas and oil. And if you make it cheap, they can't earn enough and things fall apart. And that was why they brought the Saudis in. So you had the war in Yom Kippur in 1973. OPEC caused gas lines inside the United States. They're like, shit, we're vulnerable here. We got the media, we got the military, we got the largest economy, but we're very dependent on these imports. So what they do? Join us. Let's create the Safari Group, go in 76. Bush family especially gets very tight with the princes. It says, you're going to produce this much, and we're going to give you the latest weapons. We're going to send Bechtel and Kellogg, Brown and Root and Halliburton in there. We're going to build your sewage systems, your roads, whatever. You're going to become a modern country. They take that deal. We modernize Saudi Arabia. They keep the oil flowing, keep that price down, not only for the U.S., but mostly to hurt the Soviets. So that clique from the Safari Club, they're already joining an Israeli-U.S. nexus that existed prior to that. So there's the triangle: Saudi Arabia, the U.S., and Israel. And the French. And then it's a long story. I've outlined this in a 5-hour movie called The Empire Unmasked, like why we are so tight with these cliques. And I did an interview with Dan Sanchez from Freedom Foundation that went over our Saudi-U.S. history. It's about an hour and something length, but it's a good one. Somewhere on my website, because it's banned, all my YouTube's banned, all my Vimeo is banned, I'll talk about these things. And woke culture. I was getting banned before the woke culture, though. I was getting banned in 2005. It's
long before woke culture.
Yeah, way before. It's just that starts 2013, somewhere around there, with the Soros crew. You're not allowed to say things that threaten the system. You can criticize President so-and-so, they don't care. If you criticize Israeli prime ministers, you're gone, because that's who's actually in charge.
Yeah, yeah. The old saying of want to know who is actually in charge. Look at who you can't criticize, right?
Yeah, Kevin Alfred Strom said that. If you want to know who rules you, just see who you're not allowed to criticize. Often misattributed to Voltaire. Although I could, imagine Voltaire probably he said so many little witty, quirky things. Yeah, maybe he said the same.
So one thing I want to touch on before we wrap up is exactly what's going on in Ukraine. There's a lot of propaganda around that, and there's not a whole lot of sources I would trust. Um, you are a source that I would trust with what's happening.
Thank you. I would say Doug McGregor, Scott Ritter, Larry Johnson, Andre Makinov, Judge Napolitano, or at least he'll get the people on who can speak on it. Pepe Escobar. There isn't much. Joaquin Flores. Like there's myself. There isn't much there. Essentially, what happened was that the Maidan coup in 2014, these little neo-Nazis and stuff walled people up and burned them in buildings and physically assaulted people, color revolution style. They're attacking eastern Ukraine where a lot of ethnic Russians live. Russian language is banned. But the worst thing is ongoing fight, basically a war, civil war in 2015. And Ukraine murdered 13 to 14,000 people, mostly civilians. And then they were gearing up to do it again. And they had the Minsk Accords, which Zelensky broke. Poroshenko had done the same thing. They're all terrible. It was a selected government. Victoria Nuland's on tape saying FDU, let's put Yatsnik in charge. The U.S. is the most blatantly installed U.S. coup we've ever done. Didn't even try to hide it. And then NATO's a threat. You saw what they did to Yugoslavia. You saw what they did to Libya. You see how they behave. Nobody wants that on their doorstep. Ukraine's built up this massive 600,000 person army. Why? Right? They already murdered 13,000 or 14,000 people. And then they bring in February 17th, heavy artillery. So that's the state. That isn't just somebody with a sniper rifle that started to pop off. They brought in heavy artillery and fired it in the Donbass. 5 days after all of that, Donbass starts firing back. Then Russia comes in, kicks them out of the Donbass region. That's happened. That's Donetsk and Luhansk, except for Kharkiv, I suppose. But Severodonetsk, Donetsk, Lysychansk, all these territories. And there's a land bridge to Crimea as well. Crimea, by the way, seceded. It was not annexed. There wasn't a shot fired. Everyone acted like Russia invaded Crimea. Russia already had a base in Crimea. Crimea used to be part of Russia all the way until 1954 anyway. Khrushchev gave it to Ukraine because of the horrors of Holodomor and Soviet occupation. He was from there. But it's Russian, and people who live there speak Russian. It's Russian culturally, ethnically. They're Eastern Orthodox Christian. They're Russian by any way. You can say it's Ukraine, whatever. And it rejoined Russia because Ukraine was 15 billion euros in debt, regional scapegoating, neglecting the area, abuse of all kinds. So they left. Rejoined Russia. The media acted like Russia took it by force. Nope, they had a referendum. 98% plus decided to get out of Ukraine and join Russia. They have a better life. Ukraine's the most corrupt country in Europe, other than maybe like Nigeria and Malaysia, probably the most corrupt country in the world. It's run by oligarchs. The Ihor Kolomoisky, they're involved in human trafficking, drug trade, mafia stuff, the worst things you can think of. These are not sympathetic characters. Zelensky, well, he's coke addict, pedophile, all that. But they act as a giant money laundering operation for people like Conrad Black and Hunter Biden and all these, DNC assholes. Hunter Biden worked for Kolomoisky's Burisma Holdings, right? And a no-show job. The same stuff he's doing in China with Bohai Harvest and Rosemont Centrica and so on. And a lot of the girls, Jean-Luc Brunel's last modeling outfit, by the way, was out of Kiev. He was the number 3 guy in the Epstein ring, maybe the number 2 guy, really. He got arrested and suicided in jail, just like Epstein. But he's one of these French perverts that had MC2 models, which is straight out of Tel Aviv, and then Karen in Paris, and then later New York, Miami, and so on. That is directly tied to Ukrainian oligarch front companies, rule, transit, fake passports, all supported by the state of Ukraine. Major industries selling people. And that's a long story, too, to sum it up in a few minutes. Ukraine fired on Donbass after many 8 years of abuse. Russia finally was sick of it, didn't want NATO on their doorstep, and went in and kicked them out. And the rhetoric is all Ukrainians always on the verge of winning. They're losing hundreds of men a day. It's sad. They need to negotiate before they lose Odessa, too. Russia's going to gobble up. They could go all the way to the Dnieper River. They're going to stop whenever they feel like it. They could take the whole territory, but I don't think they will because they don't want to deal with an insurgency for the next 40 years. But they're going to take all the majority ethnic Russian territories, and that's Russian forever. Good job, Ukraine. You just lost billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of infrastructure and millions in population. For what? For what? Right? Because NATO encouraged you to kill Russians? Well, bravo. You just cut your country in half. Good job. Sucks for them. I hate war. I wish they'd end it. I wish they would just realize they have no hope of winning this war. NATO weapons and money or not. They need to have concessions. Cede the land you're going to lose anyway in order to get peace. Or keep fighting, lose 50,000 more people and still lose your land and a bunch of money and make the situation worse. Zelensky's not going to negotiate. He doesn't care how many Ukrainians die. He's personally making bank off this. So he's going to keep doing it. I'm predicting the Ukrainians are going to kill him themselves. His own military or police are going to get rid of him. You watch.
Spicy take right there. Honestly, from what I understand, I wouldn't be surprised at this point. I would see no reason for them not to. After
Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, they're like, we need to retreat. We need to fall back, strategically. Well, from a PR point of view, that's bad because he completes his takeover of the Donbass. Guess what? He took it anyway, and he lost thousands of more people for nothing. Zelensky doesn't care. He's over there doing Vogue magazine poses, He's a dead man walking because the Ukrainians are going to get rid of him.
Which is just the craziest thing I think I've ever seen was him on the cover of Vogue.
When he's grabbing his wife, they don't even look like a couple. He's just like, come here, I got this.
No, she looks scared.
Yeah. He's cheating on her. He's cheating on her with men too. This is well known. She's just I ought to have a wife. You know what I mean? It's not even. Yeah. He looks like a little gremlin. He's always got his stupid tailor-made green t-shirt with the sleeves shrunk so it looks like it hugs his biceps more. He's a little 5'0" comedian troll. And that's what Kolomoisky and these guys, they put up a front of actors and stuff. The whole cabinet is like that because it was a convenient way of paying thugs and putting them on the payroll. It'd be like, oh yeah, this guy's the art director, assistant, something of this television production. How much did that joke cost? I don't know. You can't really put a number on it. So it was a nice way of putting a bunch of thugs on the payroll and then claiming, oh no, that's not campaign finance or anything. I'm paying them to be, part of this television studio. Right. And so it's to steal a phrase. If a clown walks through the palace, it doesn't make him a king, but it does turn the whole palace into a circus.
Yeah.
And that's what you have in Ukraine, a fucking circus full of clowns.
Well said. So the thing I want to wrap up on is your new documentary.
Well, Israel dat from Franklin, but that's all right.
That's all right. I wanted to kind of wrap up on your new documentary, NUMEC.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I did include it in the episode description, so make sure and go and watch it.
Impossible for me to do without Roger Monson and Grant F. Smith and all these people that did all this work. This isn't like a lot of other films. That's all me. But this one, so many people did so much of the work already.
Yeah.
But I felt like this needs to be in film version. I add a lot of things with JFK and Epstein and so on. It's not just about the nuclear theft, but that one's I'm proud of that. I mean, that could be in theaters. It's so good. It won't though because of the subject matter. But
yeah.
If you want to know how
most
they stole the
definitely.
bomb and killed the president, I didn't mean that. My hand. If you want to know how they stole the bomb and killed the president, go watch NUMEC.
Yeah, it's a fantastic documentary. I was blown away. Everyone that took part in that did an amazing job, and he pretty much provided it for free on Rumble. So there's literally no reason to not go watch this.
It's only like an hour and 20, something like that. Thousands of sources. And it ought to create a lot of questions because there's a lot of things we sort of half went into, but didn't want to make a 10-hour movie. So I'm there for the Q&A whenever. And I appreciate coming on your show. Maybe we'll talk just about NUMEC sometime. Unfortunately, I got another show like right now to do because I double booked.
Well, no problem. Honestly, Ryan, it was a great pleasure. You are more than welcome to come on any platform that I have at any point in time to talk about any of this super important stuff, because I truly do believe that a lot of this really is important and people do need to hear these things.
Well, thank you. I hope I don't get you banned.
I knew the risk coming into this. So, if it happens, it happens. We will rebuild. So do you want to let everyone know where they can find you?
We'll build back better. ANCreport.com, as written next to my name, is my website, and that has Odysee, Rumble, Gab, VK, Telegram, all the alternative stuff. So not allowed on anything else. Can't use Patreon, can't use PayPal, can't use Facebook, can't have Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, it's all trash. And I feel like, I don't know. Right now it sucks. We're in a building phase, but as more people get banned from saying their opinion about COVID or election fraud or whatever, anyone's getting banned for anything right now, that we're having a viable alternative now because there's so many people who have nowhere to speak. So get on your Telegram, get on Odysee, get on Rumble, BitChute, Gab, places like that. That's the new stuff. And I've been on all of them since like day one.
Yeah, and it's honestly some of the best places to check him out or check out Rise to Liberty. We are also available on all these platforms. So make sure and check us out there.
Oh, excellent.
Oh, yes.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll put your link on Substack and hopefully get you some followers.
Cool. Right on, man. Thank you so much. That'd be great.
And no problem.
Thanks again for doing this, and thanks to Reed Coverdale for everything he does and hooking us up together. And,
yeah, that was Reed, wasn't it? That's right. Yeah, props to him. Had him on a couple days ago. Guy's doing good work.
Oh yeah, make sure to go follow the Naturalist Capitalist, and we'll get you back on soon, Ryan. And go have fun on the next show, and I'll be talking to you soon.
All right, I'm gonna change gears, and I think I'm talking about Libya now. So.
All right.
See you.
All right. Later, dude. All right. And that was the man himself. Thank you once again for watching Rise to Liberty. We will be getting him back on as soon as we can, because honestly, that was great. And we only just hit the tip of the iceberg with some of these issues. Tried to give a good balance of a lot of the things that he likes to talk about, kind of introduce him to my audience. So thanks for making it this far in the episode. Make sure to check us out at risetoliberty.com/links. That is where you can find links to everywhere we are on the internet. And that's pretty much it. So once again, thanks for watching. And until next time, stay free, my friends.